Do Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode of Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Zelia Edgar. The aim of this show is to discuss all aspects of the paranormal, from the relatively mainstream, downright bizarre, to pose questions and entertain ideas regarding every angle of the unexplained. So hang on to your tinfoil hats, keep your hands and feet inside the saucer, and please, enjoy the ride. Tonight, I'm very pleased to introduce my guest. Lori Bass is a lifelong Wisconsin resident and grew up immersed in the folklore of southwestern Wisconsin's unique heritage. Interested in history since she was young, specifically that of Indigenous American peoples, Lori graduated with a degree in humanistic studies and worked in the field of archaeology for a number of years. In addition to her lifelong interest in history, Lori has also harbored an interest in cryptozoology, specifically Sasquatch, ever since seeing the infamous Patterson-Gimlin footage in a documentary when she was a child. Besides an interest in cryptozoology, Lori has had personal experiences with other aspects of the paranormal, having grown up in a home with strange, potentially haunting type activity and observing numerous UFOs. And I'm also pleased to announce that tonight I'm joined by co-host Steve Ward. Now, Steve Ward has been researching the unexplained for more than half a century. He has been most influenced by writers such as John Keelian and Jacques Vallée, whose views were in counter to mainstream thinking in the realm of the paranormal. And of course, he is host of the High Strangeness Factor in this same work. So, before I introduce my guest, I would like to welcome to the show Steve Ward. Steve has been a guest twice on my show, and typically, though, you'll see me co-hosting on his show. So this will be his first time co-hosting on mine. Steve, thank you for coming on the show today.
It's great to be here. It's something else I can put on my resume, being on just another tinfoil hat.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah, but I'm really looking forward to the show today, and I'm glad that you can be here as well, because this is kind of a different show than normal. The person I'm having on today has been a huge influence on my life for reasons which will be obvious in a second here. Considering that Mother's Day, by the time this episode is released, Mother's Day in the US will have occurred yesterday. Today, I will be interviewing my mom. So, yeah, thanks for coming on as a co-host, and we can have a decent conversation about her experiences and interest in the paranormal, which was, a huge reason I've joined the field. So,
I'm going to be interested to find out how that kind of evolved for both of you guys. And I might also say that I met both of you last September at the Van Meter Visitor Festival, which is held every the last weekend every September. It commemorates the strange events that happened in 1903, the Week of Terror, as Chad Lewis likes to say, one of the authors of the Van Meter Visitor book. And it's a really great festival. It's not a huge festival, but I've found that there are so many really great people there, very interesting people, and I've been able to find some co-hosts out of that pool of people, including yourself. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you for having me today.
nice. Well, I suppose then I would like to welcome to the show Lori Bass, my mom.
Hello. Happy to
Hi,
be
Mom.
here. Hi.
Yeah, I suppose. Do you want me to call you mom or Lori while I'm interviewing you?
Zaya, it's really up to you, but I think I'd feel weird if you called me Lori. So
All right.
Steve,
So,
you can call me Lori though.
Okay, I'll call you Lori from now on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to maintain a certain air of professionalism during this.
all right. Well, I suppose, again, I'm having you on the show just because I feel like, and it's something that really didn't stand out to me until becoming more involved in the field. A lot of people ask how I got into the field of the paranormal, and the truth is that you really were a huge inspiration, and it's really come to my attention a lot recently that a lot of people are like, wait, so your mom actually not only approves of, but also takes an interest in your passion for the paranormal, and that's a rarity. So before we start, I would like to say thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome.
Can I sneak a question in here? What
Sure.
what was the first thing that started your interest, Lori? What was it? The cryptid end or ghosts or what sparked it for you?
It was the cryptid end, Bigfoot for sure. When I was little, when I was growing up in the 70s, my younger brother and I had a big interest in Bigfoot. Um, that was when those movies started coming out. I think there was a documentary by Peter Gray, if I
Yes,
remember
yes.
correctly. And we actually saw that in the theaters. And so that really just steered the whole mystery, the desire to figure this out into my mind, even as a little girl. And especially the Patterson Gimlin footage just really, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. And actually, it kind of terrified me for many nights. I had a magnolia tree that I could see in our backyard through my bedroom window. And there were a number of nights after seeing this movie that I thought, sure, Bigfoot was standing out there by that magnolia tree. And, I don't think he was. We never saw any footprints or anything, but it was definitely Bigfoot. Um,
It was the mysterious monsters. I just
okay.
Googled it to be sure.
Mhm.
I saw it too in the show, but I couldn't remember the name of it.
Yeah. And, it was mainly my younger brother and myself that were interested in it. Our older siblings, mom and dad, didn't really take an interest in it. So it was kind of the two of us. But then as I got older, I do remember hearing a story. My mom actually said she grew up in southwestern Wisconsin on a farm. And, oh, it was probably, she was born in 1932. And so she was still a child. And she said that there was an afternoon where a hairy arm actually reached in through the window, and that's all she remembers. She doesn't remember anything else about what happened after that, about what people did. She just remembers a hairy arm. And of course, obviously, they must not have had screens on their windows. So that kind of made things seem a little bit more real too, because my mom isn't somebody who, jokes around and makes stuff up. She tells you something, it's the truth.
Yeah. I know, I do feel like that kind of gives, like, a personal anchor a little bit to your interest, starting out.
Yeah, yeah. But then growing up in southwestern Wisconsin too, we did have, and just another tinfoil hat had this uh, video about the Nodoff house. And so we knew about the story about the happening with the Noel children, and that was just something that was unexplained, and that was always fascinating too. And we could actually drive by the house. It was like a scary haunted house. It was abandoned, and that kind of got me interested just in the whole, I guess maybe ghost story area.
Was that a
So,
was that a murder or something like that?
the Noel house is it's the story where it was in the mid 1800s, and this young family had two children that during the night, so their house was always locked up at night, and there was a big storm on this particular night, and the parents woke to hear their children crying. And so you can correct me if I'm wrong, because now
Mhm.
you know the story way better than I do, even though I grew up hearing it too. Um, but they couldn't find their children in the house. And so then they discovered that all the doors and windows were still locked, but their children were outside in the rain. And so they, of course, didn't know how that happened. Then they brought them inside. And on top of them being outside in the first place, when they brought them inside, they were totally dry. And so that was just a story that, you grew up hearing. And Platteville, it's on the side of the Big M. I don't know if you're familiar with the Big M in Platteville, but it stands for mining for the university. And, growing up there, we would often climb up the Big M, which actually is not a small feat, because from the top of the M, you can see the tri state area. And the house is right on the other side of the Big M. And so when you're out doing that, and they also used to light the M for homecoming, they'd actually, start it on fire. And, so at those times, you'd also make a little trek around the side of the M to look at the Nodal house where these students happened to play.
So was it an urban legend kind of a thing?
You
It's
know, I mean, I guess people might call it that now, but this is something that, it was a story that went through generations. So,
Yeah, it's purported to have actually occurred. I know there is a piece of actual genuine, straight up folklore about it, and this was pointed out to me by Todd Roll. The story claims that when the children came back, They were stuttering, and the stutter remained with them for the rest of their lives. They actually did grow out of it. So that's the one piece of pure fiction about the occurrence, but the rest of it supposedly did happen. I know to me it seems very almost shades of missing 411, or a case of human
Yeah.
apport. So, and nearby to the town of Aniton, I guess there's a kind of piece of local folklore that supposedly vanishes and reappears from time to time, and that people have gone missing on their way there. So I don't know how much of that is true, but the Nodolf incident is supposedly a true story.
We actually know, I know a family that is descendants of the Nodal family in
Ah,
Platteville. Hmm.
just before I give it back to Celia,
Mhm.
since I'm just a lowly co-host here. But curious because everybody has a story about how they got interested in Bigfoot, and I was so interested as how many people from I think Ken Gerhardt, Lyle Blackburn, the famous James Bobo Fay from Finding Bigfoot. It
Hmm.
was the legend of Boggy Creek seen at the drive-in, which seemed to spur so many people's interest. Now I never saw that when it came out. I saw it years later, and I thought, "Oh, what a cheesy flick!" But that was just me. Uh, I guess they're going to remaster it or something like that. For my introduction to Bigfoot, being a UFO guy, we're in the old anthologies of Frank Edwards. Uh, he would write about the Flatwoods Monster and all kinds of things, but he had a chapter in one of them called "The Monster Apes of Oregon," and I thought, wow, giant monkeys in the northwest of the U.S. That's pretty different. So that was my introduction. But
That's neat. As I got older, though, I grew out of the belief for some time in Bigfoot, and it actually was. I think it was when Celia was maybe 3. This kind of sealed the deal for me. I mean, before that, when I was in college and before I became a mom and I was working, I had kind of tossed the idea a little bit, like, yeah, I don't know. That's really funny that we fell for that, ha ha ha, that attitude. And we were watching Reading Rainbow, and LeVar Burton, I believe, was the host,
Mhm.
and he was cross country skiing. And when I saw that, I thought, you know what? That's kind of the stance that the Patterson Gimlin Bigfoot had. So yeah, it obviously was somebody in a suit, and that's why the foot pads were too big, and so that's why they were walking funny. It had to be that. But then years later, when Zoe was maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9, I thought, well, you know what? We're just going to look into this, because I was starting to be interested in it again, and so I just thought, well, this will be a neat thing for her to maybe get into and just know about, because I really enjoyed it when I was a kid. And her 2 younger sisters at the time really weren't that interested in in the subject, so she was a rapt audience. So I Googled Patterson Gimlin footage, and when I watched it with her for the first time, I thought, wow, you know what? By then they had like enhanced it and stabilized it, and I thought, this does look like a real living thing. As an adult, as a mom, I'm watching this now and starting to believe it all over again. And then the more I looked into it, and we started watching shows and documentaries, and I did some reading, then it became real to me again. And and the whole idea was to get her interested in something that I thought wouldn't be scary. But then I was kind of at times thinking, wow, this is real. This is kind of frightening if these things really exist. But then we got interested in and I don't remember exactly how we found out about Linda Godfrey, but being from Wisconsin, obviously she's also from Wisconsin. I think we just happened to see in passing that she was going to be doing a book signing in Madison, and so this was when Zoya was 10, and I just took all 3 of the girls and we went down to see Linda Godfrey at Barnes and Noble, and Zoya loved it,
Yeah, that
and by
was
then,
that was a real
yeah.
life-changing moment for me. I know I've mentioned that on a lot of shows. So, but you remember too, didn't you say that you actually remember hearing about the initial Beast of Bray Road sightings back in 91?
Oh, yeah, I was living in Green Bay at the time, and I remember it was after Christmas, and I saw this headline in the paper, and the thought of it just, I didn't want to believe it at all. I didn't want to believe people were seeing any of this stuff, so I just didn't even. I just wouldn't even let myself go there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I heard Linda Godfrey way before she was well known. I think she had just written The Beast of Bray Road, and it was on a some podcast from I guess it had to be in the '90s. I guess yeah, it would be about right. So that was my first introduction to these. Of course, we're talking about the upright canids, the strange dogmen, or what else do they call them? Man wolves.
Man wolves,
She
yeah.
was calling them
Yeah.
man wolves in Wisconsin and dogmen in Michigan.
Mhm.
But yes, and she's quite a lady too, Linda Godfrey.
Oh, I know. She was so personable and so excited to see Zelia's interest. I remember at that time, she even on her blog, she wrote about Zelia on her blog. And so, we printed it up and we communicated with her back and forth a bit. And she is just a wonderful person, and we're very lucky to know her.
Nice that we got to see her last year in Van Meter.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was surreal to that being my first live presentation and to have Linda Godfrey also presenting there. That was just like a very surreal moment for me. And then shortly after that time too, we've met a lot of great people in the paranormal. Because I think it was about a year after Linda Godfrey's book signing that we went to the first Chad Lewis presentation that we saw.
Yes, thanks to you having a dentist appointment in the middle of the day, I had to pick Zelia up from school, and we have a radio station in Beaver Dam that really small town, and people are always surprised when I say that I'll have it on in the car. We listen to it. It's just it reminds me of the radio station when I was growing up, and I happened to be in the car, and I was picking Zelia up and had the radio on, and they were talking to Chad Lewis, and so that was just perfect. And I thought, oh my gosh, we have to go listen to this man. I've never heard of him before. I didn't know, like, for some reason, I guess I just thought maybe, it was just relegated to Linda Godfrey. She was the only one that was really looking into this at the time. And in Wisconsin, local people that you could actually see and talk to. And so I was very excited about that, and just decided at that moment that we had to go check him out, listen to his presentation, and then the rest is history as far as that goes. And I think that he became like his biggest fan club, and know some of his presentations better than he does. No shade.
My first time meeting Chad was a few years ago, my first Van Meter festival. I met Chad and Chad Lewis and Kevin Nelson, which are two of the authors of the Van Meter Visitor, along with Noah Voss. And I have to tell you, it was so cool because it had been a long time since I'd gone west. I mean, I live in South Central Michigan. I'm always going north or east or south or southeast or whatever. And but I hadn't been through Iowa even for decades, and so it was just kind of like, okay, I'm going solo. My regular buddies aren't going to be there. It's a festival I've never been to, so and it was so much fun. I mean, you know how Kevin and Chad are. They're just easy to talk to, and I just met a lot of great people there. And Brandy, who you know is another one of my co-hosts,
Mhm.
and just like I said, just an excellent crop of people. So, and it's fun to watch Chad nowadays, isn't it? You see him with those sound bites on the different TV
Oh,
shows.
yeah.
I mean, he's so animated, and he's really, you know, he really kind of he doesn't exactly color up, but he's got a great delivery for
Mhm.
whatever cryptid he's talking about. You're not gonna if you're kind of not paying much attention to the TV set when Chad comes on and he's delivering his bit on the Wendigo or the Dogman or whatever, you all of a sudden you have to listen.
Pretty amazing. And I've always liked the way he presents these creatures or these happenings, these incidents, because he really just tells you what happened, and kind of lets you decide for yourself instead of just really steamrolling you with oh, this is definitely the ghost of the person that was here, or I've been killed here, or it's really just factual, and it's not something that really arguable. That makes sense.
And he does all those dares. He goes to all those cemeteries that have chairs in them that if you sit in it, you're going to die within the year, and all that crazy stuff. He has. Oh, you guys, last year at the festival
Oh yeah.
afterwards, you guys did the Azealia did a particular dare, and Lori and I were there to witness it.
And thank goodness you brought over some delicious coffee, Steve. It was well needed after that late night.
One of the last runs of the old gray Ghost. My car was actually I found out later the transmission was dying. So it's a good thing I got home after that.
Oh,
Oh my
no,
gosh.
no.
Yes.
That's terrible.
Should we chalk it up to the Van Meter visitor curse?
Yeah. So it was the Bloody Mary thing.
Oh
that you
no,
did,
that's
right?
right. Yeah. Yep, that was the infamous Bloody Mary dare that we attempted, and as of today, I am still around. So I think Chad is too. Last I heard.
Yeah, unless he's just on videotape, that could be it.
Oh geez, yeah, haunted video cameras. I suppose while we're on the topic of ghosts, sort of, I would like to hear a little bit about something that I have grown up hearing my entire life, and probably one of the reasons I am so interested in the paranormal. Mom, you have had honestly a pretty significant amount of encounters with the unexplained throughout your life. Do you want to kind of get into that topic a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think how it all began because, as I said earlier, too, the only real exposure I had to ghostly happenings, but really the Nodal house isn't really a ghostly occurrence, so I can't really say that. So as far as like my experience with ghosts before anything ever happened to me, ghostly happened to me, it was pretty small. Like I don't really remember having an interest in ghosts or really being freaked out by ghost stories or telling ghost stories or hearing ghost stories, and until I had my first strange, unexplainable experience when I was 10. Boy, now I can't really remember, 10 or 11. And our family had just moved from the house that we had lived in all of my life previous to this. We moved to another house, and it was an older house in Platteville, down the street from the mining museum. And my younger brother, Michael, and I didn't always get along. We would with some things, but then, you had that brother sister competition thing going on, and he was the youngest in the family. I was the youngest girl. And so, who wins out in that situation? But we didn't always get along. And it was one particular summer morning. We were obviously home from school, and most everyone else was not around. They were outside doing something. As you know, well, Julia knows this. My mom, aside from having 9 children of her own, had a daycare in our home. So there were also other children that were always around. And on this particular summer morning, the only other person that was in the downstairs part of the house was this little boy who actually, unfortunately, had been involved in a car accident, and he couldn't speak very well. On top of the fact that he was 3, and so he was in the dining room, and then off the dining room there was the kitchen, and then we had a good-sized pantry. And I've always been a coffee drinker, so I was in the pantry out getting coffee, and my brother was sitting in the kitchen at the kitchen table. And all of a sudden, I heard in my ear, a voice say, "I like you." And of course, I looked at my brother in astonishment, and he was looking at me with the same expression on his face. And so I just said, "What did you say?" And he said, "I didn't say anything. What did you say? You said something too, but what was it? What did you say?" Because neither one of us wanted to say that we heard the other one say, "I like you." And so I just finally said, I said, "Well, you said I like you." And he said, "No, you told me you liked me." And so at that point, we got, looked to see if anybody else was around, and discovered, I think his name was Andrew, in the dining room. And we had no explanation for the voice. And of course, we told people in the house, and nobody really believed it. And they just thought we were making it up and, telling stories for attention until, I think maybe it was later that summer, my mom and one of my other sisters, I have 6 sisters, so there are plenty of sisters, but this was my sister, Mary. They were in the same vicinity of the house, the kitchen and the pantry. And they heard someone say, "Good morning," from the dining room area. So they go to see who it is, and no one's there. And now my oldest sister Diane is very scientific, so she heard this too, and she thought, well, you guys are just imagining this. You're not going to hear a voice just out of the blue. It's just, it just doesn't happen. Until it happened to her and my mom, and they were in the same spot, the kitchen and pantry, and from the dining room, they heard someone say, "Knock, knock, can I come in?" No one was there. So that was when things really kind of started happening in the house on Lutheran Street. And from there just were a number of different unexplainable events that apparently have affected some people in the house, maybe a little bit more than others. For me, at the time, it just kind of made me feel better. Not when I was a child, but when I got older, because I lived there until I was a young adult. And my mom actually lived there, a number of years after I even moved out. And up until she moved out, there were things that were going on. Obviously, I didn't experience them because I wasn't there. But as I got older, it was almost kind of like not really a fear, but just kind of like a comforting thing because, for me anyway, it was comforting that everything didn't have an answer.
And you weren't the only one, obviously, to experience it. A lot of other family members were hearing
Oh
things.
yeah, and it wasn't just hearing things. There were there was one bedroom that as people, as years passed and my siblings, including myself, as people moved out and people got different rooms. I mean, with a big family, there were only, it was a big house, but there were really only 4 traditional bedrooms in the house, and so there was sharing bedrooms, and then somebody moved out, the next person got that bedroom. And the one bedroom that was in the front of the house actually became known as the ghost room because there were, and we didn't really know this because at the time a lot of this was happening, not everyone was sharing what was happening, which is really funny because, like in all these ghost shows, they make it seem like, oh, everybody's aware of what's going on and everybody believes it and everybody's afraid. And that's not what we experienced in our house. And I think a lot of it was too, it's like that's your home, that's where you live. And really, you just don't want to maybe think that it's scary. I mean, I don't know because afterwards, as years passed and we're comparing these stories, we're like, that's a little weird. That's kind of freaky. How could we even sleep in that room? When I had the ghost room, I was a freshman in high school. And for me, I grew up with a fear of dogs just because I hadn't had much experience with dogs. And I woke up one morning because the end of my bed was just pounding, like it was just shaking. And the only thing that I could think that was doing that was that somehow someone's dog had got in my room and it was down at the bottom of my bed, scratching itself and hitting the bed. So that's what I thought. That's what I was afraid of. So I jumped out of my bed, looked under my bed. There's no dog. So I'm like, oh wow, well that's weird. And I just went back to sleep, relieved that there was no dog. But this particular bedroom too, my brother had he had a number of like premonition dreams for I mean I won't get into the details, but things that had happened that were tragic, with people that he had known in his life. And then my sister, one of my other sisters, when it was her room, apparently had a number of dreams where she had left her body and she would see herself sleeping in her bed. But also my brother and this one sister too would experience the bed shaking. One night my brother woke up and he said that it was, I mean, there's no explanation for this, but he said that the mattress was even just like not properly on the bed. It was shaking so much. And, as I say this, it sounds incredible, but these are things that have happened. And, when they happen in your family and your family, there's no explanation. It's weird. It's unbelievable, but I believe them. My experience happened. And as crazy as they sound, they happened.
Zelia, your mom must have nerves of steel to think some of this was comforting. I would have been in the next county so fast that you know.
Well, they run in the family, obviously. But
So,
and I would like to remind everyone that you are listening to Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Zelia Edgar, joined by co-host Steve Ward, and we are visiting with Lori Bass.
Oh, yeah. One of the daycare children that my mom watched for a time, um, he had his colors mixed up, and for him, when he would say brown, that meant white. And he would often say when he was in that room, he would, ask about the woman in the brown dress. And it was kind of a constant for him. It was like, just like on rewind all the time, you know, curiosity about the woman in the brown dress that he was seeing in that room. But then later on, when my mom did sell the house, she sold it to a family. And the people across the street, my mom remained in contact with them for a time being. And one of their daughters played with one of the daughters that moved into that old house. And I guess they would tell stories about that room too, about how, strange things would happen and nobody liked that room that was, in the front of the house off the bathroom. So it wasn't just us then, and it wasn't like, anyone, prompted her to tell these stories. It was just out of the blue she offered the information.
Yeah, I do think, the interesting thing here, and we were kind of like touching on this a little bit earlier, is that you brought up a great point where a lot of the times when people show like a haunted house in movies or TV or whatever, it's always painted as like, everything's kind of scary and stuff like that. But with this, yeah, there were scary and very uneasy events that happened. But really, there was kind of a lack of correlation between the different members of the family. Like you all sure were aware of things happening mainly from a personal angle. They were happening to you. And it seems like it wasn't until after you guys all moved out that you started really lacing it together and being like, yeah, this was kind of, there was a lot of strange activity in this house.
Yeah, and when certain things would happen, like there was an episode when the whole family was in the dining room, and for some reason, my one of my sisters um, would often have things directed at her. This wasn't the sister that had slept in the ghost room. This was another one of my sisters, and she would, and this is a weird situation, but we would, for some reason, brush our teeth in the pantry of the house. And at times when she would be out in the pantry brushing her teeth, we had a mirror out there. It was a big pantry. Um, Glasses and would fall, not glasses, but we had like these little plastic glasses. They would just fall off the shelf in the pantry toward her. I don't know if I can't recall if she ever got hit, but they would just fall for no reason, and they had been, properly on the shelf. A jar of peanut butter exploded one night when she was out there. And her senior picture, we were all in the dining room and watching a movie, and her picture, it's really interesting how this happened. I heard a loud noise out on the stairway. You know how like most houses will have the senior pictures of family members up on the stairway wall. And so my mom had that. And my sister's picture, somehow it was almost like it was slammed up against the wall because everyone heard the noise and we ran to see what had happened. And part of her picture was on the landing, but the rest of it was really strange because the sides of the frame were still attached to the wire that was still hanging on the nail in the wall. But the picture on the floor still had the top and lower part of the frame on it. So no one could really understand how, first of all, it fell, or also how it broke. Which I know, and that's not scary. That's not really scary, but it's weird.
What's really scary is exploding peanut butter.
That's true. Yeah, that is scary.
Oh man, the ghost of Skippy Past.
That's good.
Thank you, thank you.
But a lot of the things was just it was just unexplainable. I mean, glasses, in the dining room, there were a number of times where glasses would be in the middle of the table, and no one's in the room, and all of a sudden it's broken on the floor.
But nothing
Um,
threatening. It just kind of
Nothing
sort of
really.
mischievous things like that, but nothing really.
Kind of, yes. There were times though. I actually had something happen to me when like shortly before I actually moved out of the house, and um, I was upstairs, and because at the time I think my dad was remodeling, so we only had one bathroom, and that was upstairs. And so at the time, I I was watching this particular night. I was watching a movie with my then boyfriend, and we were watching a movie in summer night, and we were the only ones in the house. And I went upstairs to the bathroom, and I heard what I thought was my dad, because his bedroom was the attic room, so there was a door that led up to the attic in his bedroom. And I heard him closing the door. Like, it was kind of a humid night, but the wood was not like you know how wood gets kind of, it expands when it's humid. And so it sounded like he was pushing the door closed on the attic. And, it was a still humid night. And I looked in there, because I was like, what's he doing? It's dark in there. What's going on? And then I realized, oh, wait a second. He's not home. Nobody else is home because they had gone to visit another sister of mine. So that moment, according to my boyfriend, I screamed, and I didn't come downstairs right away. And of course, he didn't come up to get me because I screamed. So apparently, after probably what seemed longer than it really was, but I screamed, didn't come right downstairs. But then all of a sudden, he's down at the bottom of the stairs, and I come tearing down the stairs. And then I was terrified, and he was obviously scared too. Otherwise, he probably would have come up to get me, I would think. And so we didn't want to stay inside the house. So we actually went outside and were just kind of pacing on the sidewalk, at which point my oldest sister came to the house and saw us pacing on the sidewalk, wondering what we were doing, and, just bravely entered the house because she wanted a cup of coffee. So there were things that were kind of scary, because then when I told that story to my younger brother, he said, "Yeah," he said, "I always got this feeling, quite often, when the house was quiet, but then again, the house wasn't normally quiet, so maybe that in itself was just weird." But he said, "I just always got the feeling that I wanted to run down those stairs and get downstairs as fast as I could."
So he wasn't
Um,
exactly your great protector that night, your
my
boyfriend.
boyfriend? No,
Yes.
he definitely was not. No, for sure. But yeah, and I think it just varies with, the people in my house. Because even to this day, my younger brother does kind of have more of like an ominous memory of the many things that happen in the house. Because I know I'm sure there's a lot that I'm forgetting, um, that happened. But it just was really strange, because before that, no one else in my family had ever experienced anything like that. And, in the places that I've lived since then, I've never experienced anything to that level. Some places are just, I don't know, there's just nothing. And when my mom moved from that house to a different house, you know, nothing like that happened. And she's kind of superstitious. She doesn't like to talk about it. Um, but thinking that if she talks about it, she'll invite something into the house. But, it's just, there's nothing like that there. There's never been any strange, unexplainable happening in that house.
My wife is kind of sensitive. She lived in the house she lived in before we got married with the kids. There were a lot of things that happened. Her sister-in-law was there one time, and she was upstairs. She heard somebody turning the water on in the kitchen, like on and then
Mm-hmm.
off, on and off. One time, Scott, he was just a young one then. He heard the toilet flush upstairs when nobody was home. Hightailed it to his grandmother's house, and Sarah would just say, "Oh, it's just George. Don't worry about it. Just George." She had her one night. She was sitting on the couch watching TV, and her hair was pulled in the back just a couple times, lightly, and there's nobody back there. So, at one time, uh, I because I guess I was in proximity with her. We were upstairs, and in one of the rooms, and I heard a noise. It was sort of like somebody taking an intake of breath, kind of like like that, and we both heard it. It was over by the heat register, so I brushed it off as, "Oh, it's got to be something to do with the ventilation, right?" But we both heard it. We both pretended we didn't hear it. So that was the closest I've. And she has heard things in this house too occasionally, but I must have a permanent, figurative, at least tinfoil hat protecting me because I just don't expect. I don't experience anything.
And
Wow.
that's kind of the interesting thing because I know, of course, John Keel talks about every now and again how it seems like sometimes certain families will be plagued by the phenomenon. And when I read that, it's hilarious because that sort of thing didn't occur to me until recently. Kind of thinking about the occurrences that I've had or that people in my family have had in conjunction with my research. And the further removed in a way I get from it, the more I'm like, that is kind of interesting because I mean when you review all of these stories from that house all told, it comes across as a very classic haunting type scenario.
So you've experienced ghostly phenomena and UFOs, and but you've never seen a cryptid.
No, I have not seen a
Okay,
cryptid,
uh,
unfortunately.
or fortunately,
I
it depends on the cryptid, I guess.
was going to say, shout out to any Sasquatches that want to come visit the neighborhood. Yeah, no, speaking of UFOs too, that was something else that occurred in that house, which I've talked about a little bit, I think, on a few different shows, but I'd really like to hear the story from you since you were one of two people to experience it. Was that particular UFO encounter, and this is another interesting thing, just how the phenomenon is kind of, spun based on what you expect of it. Whenever you told me the story, and whenever I heard it from my aunt growing up, you know, it was always just kind of lopped in as something weird that happened in the haunted house. Never specifically as a UFO until I developed an interest in UFOs. So, you know exactly what I'm talking about, of course.
Yes, it was a summer night again, and I would often stay up late by myself, and I love westerns, and so I would
Ah,
stay up late at night and watch TV. We really didn't have any rules in the house that I grew up in, and so I could stay up and watch as much TV as I wanted until they turned the TV station off, which they used to do. They don't do that anymore.
I
But on
remember
this,
that.
I have to tell you something. This is. There was one night, like I used to watch Gunsmoke. Well, I used to sit up. We had this green recliner that during the day was my dad's chair, but at night when he was in bed, I could sit in the green recliner. And so I would sit in that chair and watch Gunsmoke. And apparently, I couldn't make it that night, and I had fallen asleep and didn't even realize that they turned off the TV station. And my sister came in the living room and found the TV just all staticky, and I'm sound asleep in the green recliner.
Oh,
So
it's like that classic
yeah,
scene from
but
Poltergeist.
yeah. But on this particular night, I didn't know at the time that it was a UFO. Again, I'm a kid, I'm a little kid, and I don't know. I didn't really have an interest in it necessarily, especially in UFOs. And this particular summer night, I had just gotten done watching, or it was still on, Alias Smith and Jones. And I looked out the window because what I thought was the moon seemed very big, and it seemed like it was getting bigger. And then I just remember it kind of going away, like fading away. And I thought that was really strange. And somehow my sister, who had the ghost room at the time, said, "Okay, we saw it." Can't remember if I was in her room or if she came down to the living room, but she had seen it too, and she was like, "Wow, did you see that? I thought it was the moon, but the moon doesn't do that. That doesn't happen with the moon." And then we just decided, yeah, that was really strange, and then we just went to bed, without even really telling anyone or discussing it any further. Just acknowledging the fact that yeah, we had both seen something really weird.
Well, when you were watching your TV show, was there a chunk of it missing? Like it's a missing time?
No, I don't remember. I really don't remember. Like I honestly don't remember if it was like during an advertisement, when I got up when you used to have to watch advertisements and notice this, or if it was over. I really don't remember that.
Well, the odd thing here too is that she remembers it a little differently, and there's a transitional point that's missing, and that's how she ended up next to you. Because I know, from what I've heard, with her telling the story, is that she was up in the ghost room when she first noticed it. And so, as to how you guys did end up standing next to each other, that transition isn't really accounted for. And she remembered it different. I don't think she remembered it fading away. You'll have to correct me on that.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
do have different.
You know, Zilly, you're going
Um,
to put your sound effect in right here that you use at the end of the show.
Ooh-wee-doo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
Um,
very cool, though.
and that wasn't really the end of that. But I know that my aunt, your sister, after that started having odd dreams um, involving orbs and things like that. And that I think too is the time when she started having the flying dreams where she would see herself. So, it's interesting to me. And again, this growing up with an interest just vaguely in the paranormal, this was always just kind of a weird thing that happened in the haunted house. It's really kind of the only way anyone ever talked about it. And it was when I started reading, some of the more conventional UFO stuff and especially UFO abduction stuff that suddenly I was like, that is a little strange. That sounds like a UFO. And especially too to then start having the dreams. Um, and there was a disconnected occurrence that you both shared, you and that particular sister, that happened about a year later, right?
yes, she had moved out and was living in an apartment in Platteville. Um, she's 11 years older than I am, and she was living there with one of my other sisters. And again, it was a summer night, and I kind of am OCD and a little creature of habit where I normally I had long hair when I was a child, and I would put it back in braids when I would sleep at night. And I think I was maybe 11 or 12 at this time. And on this particular night, I just threw caution to the wind and I just didn't braid my hair. So I slept with my hair out. I was so tired that I didn't get ready for bed. And I was so tired that night that I didn't braid my hair, and I actually slept in my clothes, which it was just this blouse that I had on earlier in the day or throughout the whole day. And I didn't really see my sister much after she moved out. But then the next day she came over because she said that she had a weird dream about me. She said that she thought she was awake in her room and I was sitting next to her by her bed. And she described what I looked like. She described what I had on in my hair. And that's exactly what I had worn to bed the night before. And she said then that she got up to turn the light on during the night and then I was gone.
I was gonna say, it sounds like you might have had a classic out of body experience, just didn't remember it, but she saw you and dressed as you were, and that's, wouldn't be. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that, but it wouldn't be unusual
Yeah. And
for
I
that to
know,
happen.
because again, too, this was just another one of those things, when something is like, a very classic ghostly type occurrence or whatever, it's easy to peg that. But this was another thing that was kind of, you know, don't really know exactly what to make of it unless you start getting into some of the more like, fringe research such as Keel and stuff like that with paranormal. And I know when I heard that, and again, this was, I think when I started thinking about these two occurrences, I was still with MUFON and I was starting to get into like some of the heftier abduction type stuff. And I kind of wonder if those two events might possibly be connected somehow, seeing that light together and then, about a year later, having that very specific out of body type experience where she saw you and
Well,
was
it
able to identify you.
it might the famous Coin helicopter incident, which occurred in '73. They were National Guardsmen. They had a almost a collision with a apparently solid UFO,
Mhm.
and but the UFO seemed to pull them up from the ground. Uh, very credible. Very these all these guardsmen, and later on, some of them started having out of body experiences. One of
Mhm.
the guys got up at night to visit the little boy's room, and he looked back, and there he is sleeping in his bunk. So, and it was seemed to be directly. It was right after this this close encounter with this strange craft.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I mean, yet again, there's so many instances where these things are tied um really quite closely. That's something that, because again, you've had an interest in the paranormal for a long time, mainly on the cryptid side of things, but still an interest and experiences with, the unexplained. What do you think about that concept, Mom? Like about things being connected?
Well, I do think that everything is connected. I never really, studying it in different categories. I mean, you kind of just have that prejudice that it's not.
Zealy and I have talked about this a lot
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we have gone from my path was I started out being interested in UFOs, and reading these great books by Frank Edwards, as I mentioned, and the Lorenzens talked about these the landings and the humanoids and so forth. And it was we both. I think we were both kind of comfortable in that kind of
Mhm.
zone. Ghosts are separate, UFOs are separate, cryptids are something else. And then we encountered John Keel. You
Yeah.
know, his books, Operation Trojan Horse, Strange Creatures from Time and Space, and he starts to pull things together. And he refers to Charles Fort, who was that great researcher back around the turn of the last century, who wrote the books, the Book of the Damned, and so forth, where he culled all these things out of scientific journals, and he's the one that said Charles Fort said you can measure a circle beginning everywhere. So Zelia and I are just kind of that's kind of I guess the way Zelia the way we're wired these days.
Yep.
But we weren't, and it'd be interesting to know what uh, you as someone who we everybody regardless of where they are now looked at these things as something separate, and some still do. Some are a guy unfriended me on Facebook because I accepted the possibility that Bigfoot might have some stranger aspects or some paranormal overtones. So there's no right answer there,
Mhm.
and there may be quite a separateness to some of it, but so much of it to me does seem to be connected.
Yeah, that's
But when you were watching the Patterson film and watching the Peter Graves documentary, you were probably looking at it as pretty much an unknown creature, right?
yeah. Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Well, I know Bigfoot too for me is still kind of old habits die hard. I want to believe in a flesh and blood Bigfoot. The evidence that I've seen recently, and the more you look at even some of the classic cases, there has got to be something more going on, in my opinion, at least. And I know I was excited to watch Expedition Bigfoot. I think they did a really good job handling some of the fringier aspects of the Sasquatch phenomenon by letting evidence such as orbs and even disembodied voices kind of stand in their Bigfoot
Yeah,
show.
I agree.
Yeah, I was really excited to watch that. So and it's one of those things where I think there's going to be more than one answer, and even with something kind of as confined as Sasquatch, it could be that there is some creature and that creature possesses abilities that we don't understand, or that there is a mimic created of that creature, as there are mimics created of, other mundane creatures, cats, dogs, chickens. I mean, the phantom chickens of Chicken Alley, a classic Chad Lewis
Now
case.
that's as scary as exploding peanut butter.
Yeah, so I know that's kind of my standpoint.
But
But
but I think you're right. I think uh, that there does seem to be, I have gone on both sides. I have been pulled all the way over to the, I don't know, the more ethereal, the more paranormal side. But you get pulled back. There's certain, I mean, there's even a lot of credibility in some of the DNA that they have
yeah.
supposedly gotten from Bigfoot. So, but then you look at the Stan Gordon Bigfoot in Laurie in Pennsylvania in 73, 74, there was these bizarre Bigfoot reports where sometimes they would get shot, they would disappear in a hail of sparks. They were seen in conjunction with UFOs and so forth. So, and Keel, of course, like you just mentioned, talked about this mimicry, this
Mhm.
paranormal mimicry, where perhaps you have the real physical stuff, and then there's some weird mechanism in, I don't know, human consciousness or something natural to the earth where it mimics it. So there isn't any right answer here, except that I think that it's important to listen to what people say they experience and not reject certain reports because they don't fit a certain paradigm.
Not only have you had a pretty significant number of experiences from before my time, we've also shared some paranormal experiences.
Yes, we have. I think this actually happened during the day. Um, I was with you and your sisters, and we were running errands. And I remember I think we had to actually leave Beaver Dam. So we were on the highway outside of Beaver Dam during the day, and we saw and the best you can describe it, it's really strange, a very tinfoil-y looking slinky way up in the sky. I think I even pulled over so we could look at it more clearly, so I wouldn't, run into someone because I was driving. And I had never seen anything like that before. And you guys hadn't either, obviously. And it just was something that was up in the sky that, it did. It looked like a slinky that was just kind of twisting and turning, but very, very bright metal, silver metal. And then I guess we were talking about that with Aaron, my nephew, and he brought up that he had some information on space worms, which I had never heard about before. So we kind of looked into that, and still not sure if that's what it was, or it was definitely something there. It wasn't like the reflection off of a plane or a kite.
Well, and the weirdest thing about it is, to interrupt a little bit, it was so shiny, very, very,
Yeah.
very bright, and that's what first attracted your attention to it. But if you could kind of like look beyond the excessive sheen, you could see this it wasn't like a structure. It was like this very, it almost, to me, it had like the appearance of, yeah, like a string, like a moving string, just way up in the sky. It was very, very bizarre. Like, we've had encounters that are a lot closer, like the orbs that we saw, and a few other weird ones. But there was something about that one. It was so bright that you could see it in the daylight, and then beyond it, there was this non-structured. It was not like a craft of any type. It was just weird shape, kind of moving around up there.
Could it have been organic?
That's the impression that I got. I know that, we did have then, and you can talk about this as well, another encounter with very organic looking UFOs. I think some years after that one.
How big was this? If you were to hold something up at arm's length, how long or how big was it? Could you tell?
I would say it was about like almost like a pinky fingernail. So
okay,
barely, 3/4 of a centimeter, if I was going to say.
And broad daylight.
Yeah, broad daylight.
And it seemed like it was very far away. And then I remember it was just gone. It wasn't like, you could follow it or nothing fell, from the sky, like, if it had been a kite or, something that, is of this world, quote unquote.
Right. And what was your other encounter?
The girls and I saw 4 orbs just right outside our house. It was a March night in 2012, and I was driving. It was an odd situation. I won't get into the personal details of the event, but uh, they were home with their dad. I was driving down the road, and I saw what I thought were lights on a crane. They were, up in the sky, and I couldn't figure out why there was a construction crane with lights on, and I couldn't make any sense of that. And then as I was looking at them, I realized that's not a crane. There's really nothing there. Those are just lights in the sky. And so I called the girl's dad, and I said, "You guys need to go outside and see if you can see something up in the sky, because I'm seeing lights in the sky, and I don't know what they are." They were orangish in color. And so they went outside, stayed on the phone with me, and keep in mind I'm driving too, trying to look at the road and also see what's going on. Fortunately, I wasn't too far from home, so I pull up and park the car. They're outside in the middle of the street looking at these lights, and they are perfectly circular orange balls of light that are very fixed in their pattern. It's like they're almost on a board or something, even though there was nothing behind them. But they weren't deviating from the pattern that they had at all. And we were watching them, and they kind of just were slowly moving over the street outside our house. And then one by one, they were gone, and they just disappeared. And we had no idea what we had just seen, and it was pretty exciting. And Celia was young. I mean, she was a teenager, but she was still young. And then, her 2 younger sisters obviously are younger than she is, so I didn't want anyone to be afraid. I don't think anybody really was afraid. It was just very curious and exciting and interesting. And as we were standing there, all of a sudden this boy that lived across the street tears through the yard. And I realized, oh my gosh, he saw them too. So we have to talk to this kid, because he must have seen them. And so sure enough, he did. And he said that, he was at a playground with some friends and that they had come over twice. And he was pretty freaked out. And to this day, we still don't know. We don't know what it was.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I think that probably was, for things seen in the sky, that was definitely my closest encounter. I mean, I would say they were about like the level of the power lines. Um, they weren't high up at all, so there was a really, really close, good view of them. But
yes, they were very low, which was surprising, and they really didn't seem to be attached to anything. They weren't light, and they didn't really give off, any sort of like projection light.
they didn't give off any like reflective light. It was like they just kind of contained it. It was very unlike anything I've ever seen. But
Yeah, unlike anything I'd ever seen either. They definitely weren't Chinese lanterns, because a couple years before that, I actually had a scary encounter with a Chinese lantern. And I don't know if you remember this, Celia, or
Oh
not,
yes.
but we live near Beaver Dam Lake, and I think it was probably one of the first times I'd ever seen one, in town, at fairly close range, and we saw this light, and it just got out of view, and I was like, oh my gosh, where's the tractor beam? It's happening now. Tonight is the night. So we drove to where we thought, it would be, and sure enough, we ended up at the lake, and we saw this Chinese lantern falling into the lake. So, so we know what Chinese lanterns are, and these were definitely not Chinese lanterns.
I had an experience a little bit like that. I had my third generation night vision goggles, and we were way up north in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a clear sky, and I'm on down by the docks, and I'm looking up in the sky, and I see this bright light moving around, and I think, like you did, this is the mothership. This is it, and it was nothing more than a firefly. So a little disappointing,
Yeah.
but it looked pretty cool in the night vision goggles.
Oh yeah, I know it's one of those things where you're relieved, but also like, ah, shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I suppose as we're coming up on the hour here, you know, I know just from talking to you kind of what your plans are regarding the paranormal, especially cryptozoology. Would you like to talk a little bit about kind of where you want to go with your interest?
Well, I think now that you guys are all older, I think I would like to do more just hands-on investigating, just actually going out there and listening, and not really being afraid. I think for a number of years, being a mom, you have to take your safety into concern. But I think I want to get more hands-on and just get out there and experience these things, and do some investigation.
Yeah. And, I'm excited about that idea. So, but really, I just, again, since it was just Mother's Day here in the US, I know I missed it by quite a bit for the UK, but since it was just yesterday for the States here, thank you for like respecting my interest in this and also helping it along as I've grown up. It's, something that not everyone does, and I really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome, because it didn't really seem like I was doing anything special. It was just, it's been fun, and I'm really proud of where you're going.
Thank you. And thanks for being on the show today.
You're welcome. Thank you, and thank you, Steve. It's always good to talk to you.
Well, it was my pleasure to be invited as co-host today, and I want to say that it's always nice when you have family members that are interested in this thing. My wife isn't quite as interested as I am, but she is interested, and she's even been to several Mothman festivals with me.
Well, before we go, Steve, too, do you have anything going on you'd like to let people know about? Direct them to your
Uh,
podcast.
we're on the same network, the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and mine is every 2 weeks, the High Strangeness Factor, and you can check the archives, and also you and I are often on each other's show or on invited as guests on other people's shows, which is always a lot of fun. So, it's funny. I can actually Google my name now, and I come up almost like I'm a famous person. I mean, it's just bizarre. So, I'm co-writing a book with Joey Medea, which is not just around the corner, but it will come out eventually, called Parallels and Patterns: A New Paradigm for the Study of Paranormal Phenomena.
I am really looking forward to that. So, well, thank you again for being co-host, and Mom, thank you again for being my guest tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
And it was my pleasure.
Once again, I would like to thank my co-host Steve Ward and guest Lori Bass for an absolutely intriguing conversation tonight. I would also like to thank Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, the people in charge here at the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And a thank you, too, to John Hutchinson for composing my intro and outro music. With all that said, if you enjoyed this program, you can catch new episodes every other Monday on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And go ahead and check out my YouTube channel, also called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. Again, this has been Just Another Tinfoil Hat, copyrighted on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.